on Oak Island or, some of these other treasure hunts. There's just so many individuals that have spent their entire life, possessed by the wreck, including me. And it just has eluded everybody. And part of it is now, a lot of times, people were looking in the wrong places. There were a lot of rocks all over Neocani Mountain with glyphs and marks on them that everybody thought were the treasure rocks, in particular the W rock, which is, notoriously famous here. And they've just been misinterpreted all over the years as being land claims for, the Spanish or Sir Francis Drake, some people believe. And there may be a combination of both. And there may be an earlier explorers here as well that led those guys here. But, that's all more conjecture than actual factual paper data, and even Drake as well. But, in my search and grouping up with the Naga Bivouac Project and Scott Williams and Rick Rogers and David Chafee, I was sharing my information that I had voluntarily, with them, and everybody was a big volunteer kind of like, hey, let's figure this out group. Nothing really, we found a lot of clues, but we never really got anything, really super solid, other than we learned that the 1700 megathrust earthquake had caused a tsunami and in this area, and that the layers of the sand, that the porcelain shards from the shipwreck that were being found by people were above the tsunami layer only, which then excluded the San Francisco Javier in 1705 because the tsunami happened January 26th of 1700, according to the records in Japan. And then the galleon was already on the beach here, stuck. And so, it looks like the gas scattered throughout the whole area by the tsunami waves when they come in, had it been stuck on the beach. And there's evidence to support that. There's also evidence to support that, the wreck had happened in one location like the natives claimed, and then most likely broke up. And I personally believe there's 3 separate kind of significant wreck sites for the galleon. The place where it wrecked originally, the place where it ended up breaking up on the face of Neocani Mountain, where I believe there was a salvage effort done there as well as the first place. And then the third place, I found it in its final resting place. The place, so let me go back. So in all the years that I've been looking for this, I've been starting, to focus more and more in certain areas from the clues. And when we were doing the Naga project, Rick was like, Craig, you need to figure out where this porcelain's coming from, because it's the biggest clue. And he's right. And I'd been kind of looking for the porcelain in the rivers because it had been scattered throughout all the native camps, and you'd find these pieces of old porcelain in the rivers, that were washing out of the banks. And so I kind of changed my search towards, the locations where these other pieces have been being found, and started documenting it. And over the period between 2006 and 2018, and I should say 19, I'd found about 3,000 pieces of Ming and Song Dynasty porcelain on the beach, just beach combing, more or less, or mudlarking from this wreck. And that's one of the ways that Scott and the other archaeologists determined that the wreck was probably the Burgos was the porcelain, and the fact that it was after the 1700 tsunami. It had to be a wreck predating the 1700 tsunami. So then in, searching and, for all the years and all this kind of porcelain trail kind of just kept leading me to these, these 2 particular spots. And, there's a really giant rock slide in this one spot. And I was like, it's the natives. There was a native story. It said that the mountain had caved in on the wreck. And you go back to the natives, and they're usually right. They had very little reason to tell something else. The they were just telling people how it was, and people didn't really, like, I think, hear them, because people were looking up on the mountain and digging holes and all over everywhere else. And so I started kind of like focusing on these rock slides, but they were the wrong rock slides because they were way too modern. And one day I was down on the beach, and I was there. Every now and then you'd see somebody else down kind of doing the same thing you're doing, and you're kind of wondering, well, should I clue them in? Do they already know? Or, are they just looking for agates? And so there was this guy down there one day, an older guy, and we walked by each other a couple of times, and, we were both doing the same thing. And finally, I said, "Oh, so you finding any agates one day?" And he says, "Yeah." And he goes, "How about you finding any other stuff?" And I says, "Oh, okay, yeah." And so we started talking, and he was like, "Well, in the 50s when I was a kid, there was that rock slide wasn't there. And that was a huge, change in my perspective of the coastline here as to, how old that rock slide was, maybe compared to others." And that gave me like this, datum point of geology for that particular event. And that was a huge key factor to my final, discovery of the wooden beams from the wreck trapped under another rock slide. But that was close to that one. But past it into a much harder to get to location where you can, literally get there a couple times a year on the most extreme tides. Super dangerous if you don't have the right gear, if you're not being careful and you're not confident about your movements. And it's just one of those locations that, don't go in there by yourself kind of situation. But I did all the time because, I have a job working, I've got a lot of time, and everybody else is doing their thing. So, it's like trying to coordinate with people that can do the same thing in these small communities is pretty hard. And so in 2019, I attempted to get out to the caves that I usually would frequent, maybe once or twice a year, mostly looking for, clues, but never really finding a ton of clues out there. I found a few pieces of porcelain and stuff that, definitely were putting it on the map, but it wasn't as abundant as in these other areas where the ocean's concentrating them over the last 329 or 30 years now, I think. And so, I tried to go out there with a friend, and we couldn't get out there. The rocks were too slick, and there's literally like a big Goonies slide of algae down this one rock that you have to, get past. And if you mess up there, you'll end up in this, chasm in the ocean, and you're going to be hurting for certain.
Scary,
and so
dangerous.
So the day after I couldn't get out there, it was a lower tide and it was drier, and that's one of the big significant factors out there. And so I made another attempt by myself, and I got out there. And there's on my YouTube channel, you can see that the first discovery video, I actually recorded it because I knew what I found. I knew I found what I was finally looking for. What I've been looking for. It could have been from another wreck, but I knew it was a piece of a wreck, and I knew it was unique to any other shipwreck wood I've seen from drag fishermen or on the beaches myself. So, I called up Scott, pretty excited about it. And he's like, "Well, there's no way there's wood from a 300-year-old galleon left anywhere, let alone in the surf zone. Like, absolutely not, Craig. Like you're not gonna even go there." So he didn't believe me, and neither did several other people that have worked on galleons that I know. I talked to. I showed them pictures, and talked to them, and they're just like, "Yeah, this looks like it could be a dock." And I was like, "It's not. Nobody's gone out there and actually looked at it. Not that it's easy to get out there, but nobody had confirmed it with me." And then I had actually called up the state preservation office to SHPO for Oregon and talked to him, and he was like, same thing that Scott said. No, there's no wood from a galleon left, but if you think it is, take some samples. And, maybe somebody will send them in for you or whatever, or you can send them in and have them carbon dated kind of thing. And so, working with Scott and stuff all these years, I was like, "Hey, Scott, you don't believe it, but he's like, "Go ahead and take the samples." And so I went out and I cut a little piece off this big beam with my Leatherman, enough to get a carbon date. And then I brought that back out and And they were like, okay, that's interesting looking, but it's just, more or less just a couple little splinters. And then nothing was really done with that at first. And then we were having this shipwreck conference up at the Columbia River Maritime Museum. And the special guest was Jim Delgado, who's, worldwide famous for marine conservation and archaeology. And I thought, maybe I can get to talk to him, or, and maybe, that was the day I actually gave the samples to Scott to send into a lab. And I actually ended up getting a couple of minutes with Jim and sitting down, and I showed him this video I had taken, the one that's on YouTube. And his first impression was, well, you found something important, whatever it is. So that was like kind of the first, support that I'd gotten from any professional that said, yeah, you may have found something. And then, and Scott was kind of on the same, page, and Rick wasn't at all. He was just like, yeah, that's nothing, but, and so were a lot of other people. And, so Scott sends it in, and he has that aha moment when they send him back the results. First, he'd sent some of the wood samples in to the state forestry, department, which is just a simple, cheap way of getting, results done, because it was all volunteer. Scott's a volunteer. Scott was, kind of assigned as the volunteer shipwreck go-to guy for Oregon State Parks. And so if they ever found a wreck, he was the guy they were going to call. He lives in Washington, and he had another job working up there. But that was kind of his volunteer interest and job. And this wreck was his, more of it, one of his bigger interests, as well as most people on the coast here. And so he gets the wood samples back, or the wood information back from the samples we'd sent in, and they turn out to be Asian hardwood and not nothing from South America or local. So that was this huge aha moment for him, like, oh gosh, let's spend the money on carbon dating this stuff. So go back out and get some more samples. So I did, and I went out. I bought a really expensive tree boring thing for reading the rings, doing dentra. I won't even say it right now, and getting some more samples off the wood to both send to several labs at that point in time. And when the carbon dates came back, it was just oh no, oh wow, because the carbon dates range from 1420 to 1679.
Awesome.
And
wow, that was a huge moment. And they knew that the beam has spike holes in it from the ship, so it's obviously man-made. It's not just some log that washed over from the Philippines or something. And so that opened the can of worms. That's the best way to put it. And the worms started crawling everywhere, out of control. And so I think I tried to let the archaeologist guys, I wanted to have them put a team together. Let's go out there and do this and figure it out. And they did everything they could, but they were getting, blocked by different agencies. And even Jim Delgado, with all of his, clout and everything, was being blocked by, state parks and blah, 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 over it. And it took 2 years until 2021 to get the permissions to go out there. And National Geographic came in, and we went out there the first time. I was banned from being out there because I'm not an architologist.
You had Nat
right
Geo
off the bat.
got to go out with you guys?
Yeah.
Well.
So they first had the camera, web page crew come to do photos and stuff. And state parks literally told National Geographic they couldn't go out to the cave sites and film what I discovered. Yeah. And of course, all the, now here's one of those situations where you have, kind of like the battle that goes on between archaeologists and treasure hunters. Now you've got a whole bunch of archaeologists that want to do something that's legitimately important, historically, significant. And now you've got another department blocking them. It was really interesting. And so they had to sort that out for 2 years. Then they had a big meetings and all this other stuff that went on. And I was banned from being able to go out there anymore because I'm not an archaeologist, you know, and now that it's a site, and